Hey, what is going on, guys? Max Settings here, and welcome back to another review. In today's review, we are going to be taking a look at the 64 audio Tiá Trio. Now, before we get on into today's review, I just have to give a big shout out to the viewer who provided these for review. If you would like to offer me something to review, my email to do so is in the description below. But once again, thanks to this viewer for providing the Tiá Trio for review. But anyway, the Tiá Trio is one of 64 Audio's hybrid options. And this comes in at a little bit more expensive than the U12T that I recently reviewed. Comes in about $2,400. And I mentioned in that review that I did want to check this out and see if maybe this was the bass head IEM to go with over the IER Z1R. And we will be finding that out today in this review. But anyway, let's go ahead and get specs out of the way. So the Tiá Trio is coming in at $2,300. It is using a 2 balanced armature, 1 dynamic driver configuration, 5.5 ohm impedance with a 104 dB a milliwatt sensitivity, and a frequency response of 5 to 22,000 hertz. Now let's go ahead and talk about the build of the Tiá Trio. So the Tiá Trio is built basically like every other 64 audio IEM. The only noteworthy thing about it is that there are no Apex modules for the Trio like there are with some of their other IEMs. Just the standard metal shell. This one has kind of like a brushed aluminum faceplate, says Tiá, and then 64. And these are Symbio tips, not the stock tips. I will link these below. And 2-pin connector, which again is my preferred IEM connector. Now, in terms of the cable and the included accessories, once again, 64 audio stock cables are completely terrible. Most $30 Chi-Fi IEMs have tremendously better cables than this, and they really should consider swapping this out for something else. It's kind of sad you pay $2,300 for an IEM and you get some of the worst IEM stock cables I've ever seen. So yeah, I would definitely recommend a third-party cable for these. And you also get the 64 audio case that I also really dislike because of the way it operates with having to put each IEM here and then wrap the cable around these two things. But you do get a cleaning brush and a little clip if you want to clip it to your clothes. So I also would probably look into a third-party case for these. But that is the accessories for the Tiá Trio. Now on to comfort. The Tiá Trio I do find pretty comfortable. It's the same comfort, like I said, for the U12s. It does hurt me a little bit because it does kind of touch a little part of my ear after a while, but overall pretty comfortable IEM. It's of the more comfortable IEMs that I have worn, and I don't think many people will have much issues with it. But again, IEM comfort I find even more different among people than headphone comfort, just because your inner ear shapes do vary quite a lot. So for me, overall fairly comfortable, but your mileage may vary. Okay, so now moving on into the sound of the Tiá Trio. So starting off with frequency response, the Tiá Trio has quite the bass shelf of about 6 or 7 dB, starting down there at about 20 hertz. After that, you're about back to flat at around 200-ish hertz, 200, 250 hertz. You're coming back down to about flat, and you have a relatively flat lower mid-range. Now, they do have a dip at around 1K of a couple dB that kind of throws them off for me, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. After that, your mid-range is relatively in line, in like your 2 to 3K area. Your like 4 to 5K is a bit recessed, a couple dB. It's also kind of off-putting. And then your treble kind of comes back up in that 9, 10K area. And you have a decent amount of air above 10K, but not the most air that I've heard in an IEM. So that is an overall look at the frequency response of the Tiá Trio. So now let's talk about the other areas of this. Now, in terms of detail, basically what I wanted out of the Tiá Trio was to be the U12T that sacrificed a little bit of detail for dynamic driver bass. And that's not really what this is. So this is still a very detailed IEM. I don't think it's $2,300 in detail. I think the U12T is a good bit more detailed than this is. This is probably more down in like the $1,200–$1,500 range in terms of detail, but it's still a very, very detailed IEM overall. Now, in terms of dynamics, this has really good bass. I don't think it's quite as textured and on this quite the same level as the IER Z1R, but it is still very, very nice dynamic bass with also really good texture, good dynamic contrast. Your overall micro macro dynamics in your mid-range and treble is also really good. Really nice, again, microdynamic contrast, really good in resolving those little micro details. So dynamics overall are quite good. Now, in terms of soundstage, they actually have pretty good stage because of that. Those couple dips in the mid-range kind of give that fake stage approach, even though your like 2 to 3K is kind of in line, but that 1K and that 4 to 5K does give your a little bit of space in lower mids and in the upper mids, depending on the range of voice of your vocalist, depending on like where they fall in that frequency range. In terms of imaging, they image really well, really nice imaging overall on the Tiá Trio. In terms of timbre, it's not the best. It definitely has some BA timbre, and I think the tuning does kind of throw it off a little bit more. I think they don't have quite as good of timbre as the U12T did. U12T had really good timbre for a BA, and this thing is using 2 BAs opposed to 12, but does have dynamic driver. So timbre on them is okay. A little bit of that plastic BA-ness to it. Not as good as the U12, but not egregiously bad in terms of BA timbre. So that is the overall overview of the sound on the Tiá Trio. So like I mentioned earlier in the review, what I basically wanted from the Tiá Trio was to be the U12T that sacrificed a bit of detail for dynamic driver bass. And like I said, this really is not that. The tuning on this I don't like nearly as much as I do the U12. That 1K dip really kind of throws off the lower mid-range for me, and that 4 to 5K is also a little bit strange compared to the U12. And I am not a big fan of the overall frequency response to these. It's not terrible, but it's not the greatest tuned I've heard. I think the U12T is tuned better, and also like the Blessing 2 here is also tuned much better than I think even both of those IEMs. But again, not a terrible tuning, but not exactly my cup of tea. These are definitely a bass head IEM, very, very bassy signature, good dynamic driver bass, but an odd mid-range tuning that kind of throws them off for me. Now, if you're going to ask, would I take these or the IER Z1R? I was not a huge fan of the IER Z1R tuning either, but overall, I do think that that's a little bit better tuned than these are, while having better bass technicalities overall, and detail toss-up without having them side by side. Hard to say necessarily, but overall, personally, I am going to take IER Z1R, but again, that thing has fit problems for a lot of people because it's quite large. But for the bass head IEM, I like the IER Z1R more. However, I definitely could see reasons to take these, definitely much smaller and more comfortable probably for most people, and a little bit different tuning with different staging. I'd say this is more of a fake stage, while the IER Z1R has more of a true stage. But you can see which tuning you like. I could see maybe somebody might like this tuning, particularly if you're sensitive to like that 4 to 5K region. But for me personally, I think IER Z1R is still going to take it for my like multi-kilobuck bass head endgame IEM. But Tiá Trio overall is not bad, just not my cup of tea personally in terms of tuning. But I will say it still gets my recommendation, at least for something to try. For a high-end bassy IEM. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my review of the 64 audio Tiá Trio. Once again, thanks to the viewer who provided these for review. Links of where to buy these in the description below, as well as my Twitter, my contact email, and all the relevant information. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.